I'm now calling to order the September 11th, 2024 meeting of the Santa Rosa City Schools Board of Education. We will start off by taking public comment on closed session agenda items, specifically item B1, public employee discipline dismissal and release, B2, conference with labor negotiator, B3, conference with legal counsel on existing litigation, B4, conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation, and B5, public employee performance evaluation. It looks like I do have a speaker card. We'll start with item B1, comment on public employee discipline dismissal and release. Peter Alexander. We'll do 2 minutes at a time. That way I delineate which specific one you're speaking on. So we'll do first 2 minutes on item B1, public employee discipline dismissal and release. You can go up to the counter. And you'll have 2 minutes, Peter, per item. Yeah. Just we'll do 2 minutes and you'll see the clock running, right? You can see the clock. And then I'll call the next item.
Okay. Okay, Peter Alexander, Chair NF, and I'm addressing public employees discipline dismissal and release. I was concerned a year or two ago when they had a shooting over at one of the schools and how they were blaming one person versus the other, and it seemed like a lot of the information didn't get forward to the public, I think, as well as it could have. And when it comes to the disciplining and dismissal, I would like to know who is responsible ultimately for this sort of decisions, because I mean, you have some people would say, well, it's the local school board, or they're being influenced by the city council, or they're being influenced by United Nations Agenda 21. So what is that all about, and how important is the U.S. Constitution when it comes to a lot of these things? Because I've also witnessed that in one of your articles, you talk about acknowledging the native lands. And so I've seen that at some of the other city councils, and they're acknowledging the Pomos and other local tribes. Well, if we're going to do that, then how is it that we're not acknowledging the U.S. Constitution, which came from the matriarchal Iroquois? And bottom line is, we know that all things are connected. So, so if we acknowledge that, then we might go so far as to acknowledge the fact that the Navajo code talkers kind of saved the day back in World War II. And if we're going to go that far, then maybe we should all acknowledge as teachers the fact that Leonard Peltier has been in prison for 48 years, represents all of that, all the indigenous resistance worldwide, and that we all have indigenous roots no matter who we are, and that the 40-day strike that was a prophetic command by Yeshua is something that we need to all embrace, and embrace it now.
Thank you, Peter. Your 2 minutes on the item are up. We'll now move on to item B2, conference with labor negotiator, specifically on CSCA Center 75 and Teamsters Local 665.
Would you be kind enough to tell me what CSEA stands for?
California School Employees Association.
Perfect. Perfect.
And your 2 minutes start now.
Right now. Okay, thank you. Peter Alexander, Chair NF, addressing point number 2. And so it seems to me that Martin Luther King said, one man wrongfully incarcerated, so are we all. And we got Leonard Peltier, who's indigenous, in prison for 48 years, and Green Beret surgeon Dr. Jeffrey McDonald in prison 52 years, a veteran, and a Black Panther by the name of Mia Abu-Jamal. Then according to Martin Luther King, and the teachers ought to be teaching this, we're all on our knees. And we've had an overthrow by the quite possibly illegal bar association of California that never redid its paperwork back in 1951. So we're not even sure if they actually exist or unless they're operating under federal mandates.
Could you just
That-
bring it back to labor
So the
negotiations?
labor is that, as Mumia Abu Jamal said, he said there was a time when all the unions used to support each other. But what's happened is with this bar association coup over the public not too long ago, you have lawyers in every union, lawyers that make more money than all the workers, and these lawyers actually never really work except with each other to keep all the unions at bay and sitting in their seats when their real power has been the general strike. And it used to be a general strike for better conditions and better monies. But these lawyers, they don't work for the unions, they work with the other unions and the city lawyers to keep everybody at bay. So the real power is for the workers to simply general strike this system into submission, knowing that we are the most powerful people in the most powerful state. And we're already on our knees as slaves, according to Martin Luther King, unless we just pretend to learn these lessons. And these lessons, to me, are very serious. And we have a lot of ability to make changes right now with the 40-day strike. I am Peter, and I am commanding it so. I say it, you hear it, it is done.
Thank you, Peter. We'll now move on to item B4, conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation. Your 2 minutes start now.
Okay, now I will finish with this litigation, which once again, I contend is not as powerful as the strike of the people, because once again, the litigation is a bunch of lawyers behind the scenes pretending that they're doing something for the people when basically they're supporting the Bar Association, which is on its knees to the usurious bankers. So we're basically a nation of people that wish to be free, but we're on our knees to bar lawyers and bankers, two groups of people that never work except with each other to steal from us. So anybody listening, I would ask you, how many lawyers got their hands in your pocket at this moment? And so I wrote this up for today, and I'm going to finish with this, and that is, teacher, teacher, will you do what's right? Like speaking responsibility with clarity is light. Amidst so many stinkers, where be the critical thinkers? College students taking classes in psych, yet know not a thing about the general strike. We're told all these things. And again, you're talking about the indigenous, so I'm going to finish by saying this. We don't even have freedom of speech. I addressed freedom of speech at the farmer's market the other day, and I was shut down, just speaking about safety for children and animals. And so what will you do, all of you, as far as Jay goes, when it becomes clear that most all cancers, wars, and trafficking of women and children is directly connecting to the slaughterhouse industry of innocent, life-loving beings? Well, now you know. I am Peter, and I'm telling you so. Free the animals, freeing Leonard Peltier and our U.S. Constitution. This be the ultimate honor to all veterans, to all Americans, to all children, and also all Native Indigenous tribes, especially the Navajo. I am Peter, and I'm commanding this so. I am, yes, I am. I be you as you be me, and I am here to set love free. And that is the power from my authority comes from on high, and that highness is in your hearts. Let it go, let it flow. It's time for California Warriors with the Christos Like to
Thank
Be the
you.
show.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank
You have a good day. I see no more blue comment cards for comment on closed session items. We will now recess into closed session. Okay. Okay, I'm now reconvening the September 11th, 2024 meeting of the Santa Rosa City Schools Board of Education. If I could have everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for our territorial land acknowledgement. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Now, if you'll please remain standing, we're going to have two students conduct our territorial land acknowledgement, Melissa Otiambo and Luis Hernandez Espinosa.
I acknowledge that the Santa Rosa City Schools is on the traditional territory and homelands of the Pomo people, traditional territory and homelands of the Coast Miwok people, in honor with gratitude in the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. This land acknowledgement calls us to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land we inhabit. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold Santa Rosa City Schools more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples.
Reconozco que las escuelas de cuidad de Santa Rosa se encuentran en el territorio tradicional de las tierras natales del pueblo Pomo. El territorio tradicional de las tierras natales del pueblo Miwok de la costa y honro que con gratitud la tierra misma y las personas que la han cuidado y administrado a lo largo de las generaciones. Este reconocimiento de la tierra nos llama a la comprometemos a seguir aprendiendo cómo ser mejores administradores y cuidar de la tierra que habitamos. Al ofrecer este reconocimiento de tierras afirmos a la soberanía indígena y trabajaremos para que las escuelas de la comunidad de Santa Rosa sean más responsables ante las necesidades de los pueblos indígenas y nativos.
Thank you. Gracias. You may all be seated now. We will now move on to item C3, report of actions taken in closed session. During closed session under item B1, the board voted 6-0 to ratify a settlement agreement with a certificated employee to accept her retirement with an effective date of September 10th. There are no items considered in closed session for action in open session. B5 is statements of abstention. Board, are there any statements of abstention? See none, we're going to move on to item C6, adjustments to the agenda. Board or superintendent, any adjustments to the agenda? I do have a comment card on item G10, which is a consent item. So we're going to pull item G10. Is there anyone in the public that needs to comment on any other consent items? If so, please raise your hand real quick and or fill in a blue card. But for now, I'm just going to pull G10. Any objections to the adjustments to the agenda by pulling G10? No objections? Okay, we'll move on to, I lost my place. Let's see. Okay, our reports. First, we'll start off with the California School Employee Association, Santa Rosa, Chapter 75. President Mary Lehman, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Good evening, President Medina, Governing Board, Superintendent Dr. Morales, Student Board member, Cabinet members, and everyone listening tonight. Special thank you for those turnout tonight, supporting our classified staff, teachers, and the community. We support the approval of action item F1, the resolution to recognize September 15th to October 15th as Latinx Heritage Month, as almost 60% of our students are Latinx. We celebrate their commitment to family, hard work, and service. Many of our classified staff are parents of these students. They would like to receive a living wage. And we approve F3, the approval of the district and school site safety plans. Our safety contract articles will be in alignment with SRTA safety plans, but our negotiations have been delayed. We have professional development days, same as SRTA. We are looking forward to the district-wide safety training with admins and teachers at our respective sites on those days. We appreciate Dr. Daisy Morales' email today, clarifying our classified staff are part of all of the adults at school that teach and help students. Yes, that's what we do every day. We make a difference in the lives of the students we serve. We plan to work together to improve the district's culture of belonging. Receiving the equivalent salary compensation package that admins and SRTA have already received would be a beginning. We will continue to be engaged and empowered and to question what happened to being equal partners at the discussion table. We care. Show us that you care. With courage and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to our SRTA report. President Howe, floor is yours.
Okay. Good evening, President Medina, Superintendent Morales, members of the board, and members of the community. I'm Catherine Howell, the president of the Santa Rosa Teachers Association, representing, I'm going to say about 900 teachers, because I think our numbers went up. So just a couple of things about what's on our agenda tonight, starting with the unaudited actuals. It's always fun to see the unaudited. It's the only time of year where the numbers are real. The rest of the time, they're imaginary, made-up numbers that we think are right. I think it's great credit to the people that we have in our business services that the difference between the estimated expenditures and the actual expenditures was less than 1%, which is impressive. So that's great. I do have a question that hopefully when the report rolls around, either someone giving the report or someone on the board can ask the same question, but in the ending fund balance of about $18 million, I get the economic reserve portion of it. What is the $11 million that's other assignments? It's a little mysterious to me. And so we are wondering what that is. If that's something that will be answered in the report, we hope it is. Thank you for that. Thank you for looking at the safety plans. We know that these plans were put together last spring while we were negotiating. So we hope that next year at this time, when the safety plans are coming before the board, they will be with a lot more involvement from SRTA members and with a lot more understanding of what's actually in them. I think what happened at LC Allen High School proved that our teachers are not getting the training, which, again, I know President Lehman mentioned it, but thank you for moving that safety training to November 1st so that everyone involved in keeping our kids safe actually know what their role is and know how to do that. So thank you for that. There is the District Safety Committee in the new contract in new Article 8, which was supposed to have met by now. I believe this is the 4th week of school. It hasn't yet met. We have 4 members ready to go per the agreement, and we're just waiting for that committee to exist. So I guess we could have the meeting with just the 4 of us and see what happens. I doubt it will have much impact. So, and then finally, I just want to say thank you to Ed Services and to Superintendent Morales and to HR. There's been a lot of talk about creating policies and creating systems, and there's been a lot of movement there. One thing that came up at a meeting that we had yesterday was the short-term independent study policies. And I know that Dr. Castro and Ed Services has already started thinking about what to do to fix that, but I wanted to bring it to this board's attention that the current board policies that address short-term independent study seem to be in conflict with each other and also seem to be in conflict with what teachers are being told to do. And so short-term independent study is when a student needs to be out of school for 2 weeks. I think it's 3 days now. It might even be able to trigger short-term independent study. We understand how important ADA is. We're not arguing that we need to bring that money in for those students, but the policies say one thing and the forms that the teachers are asked to sign say something else. And so I think that needs to be brought to the board to look at those policies and make sure they don't conflict, and also that they're policies that this school district can really uphold. So just wanted to bring that forward and say thank you for the work that's been done in creating really good, sustainable systems and policies and practices. Thank you.
Thank you, President Howe. We will now move on to our superintendent's report.
Welcome, everyone. Buenas noches. Good evening. As President Howell was mentioning, we've been talking about and meeting around systems development and the ones that need to be updated quicker rather than others. So, and then we're expediting, especially safety. So I'll leave it for the team that's going to talk about the safety plans, what we're working on, the framework that we're building, as well as the emergency response systems that we're trying to expedite with some bond money. So I'll let them speak to that. I wanted to highlight an item that is in our information section of our board agenda around the next couple of weeks that are coming up for high school voter week and some of the work and the activities that are happening on our sites. Some of our sites are holding mock trials. Other sites are doing government lessons on elections. They are making discussions and inviting people to come and speak in their classes around what it's like to be an elected official. We have students that are also doing work in their ethnic studies English classes around government and democracy and all of that related to media literacy. So a lot of great work and a lot of great learning happening in the next couple of weeks around high school voter weeks that the state has dictated for the next couple of weeks. Personally, I continue to visit sites. Today I was at East Elsie Allen this morning, as well as Luther Burbank, continuing to visit classrooms. My goal is to visit all close to 700 classrooms within the first semester. So that's the goal. And just continuing to meet with parents, meeting with families, meeting with community members. We will be selecting our superintendent student council members this week, actually tomorrow afternoon with our high school principals. So we'll be getting started with that student voice venue in October. So lots of things happening on our campus. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Morales. First off, I wanted to, thank all the parents and families that attended the Back to School for Elementaries last week, and remind everybody middle schools is tomorrow and high schools next week. So make sure to attend if you can. I did want to also just highlight that I'm excited about the work being done around the voter education weeks. Generally, the last 2 weeks in April and the last 2 weeks in September, which this year, September 16th through 27th, are those 2 weeks. I just encourage students to participate in activities, get educated on voter registration and being able to register as early as age 16 and all the things associated with that. The information item does have a lot of information on that, which I know has gone out to the sites to share with their staff and hopefully with their students. One thing that I did want to highlight that it does also allow students to participate serving as poll workers. I'm registering for that and being having the opportunity to miss school to do that is part of what's included in Ed Code. And it's all tied to this notification that went out from the State Superintendent of Education as well as the Secretary of State. So students out there or teachers, if you have students that might be interested in doing that, feel free to learn more, or you could email me and I'll try to find out more for you. With that said, I'll open it up to the board for comments. We'll start with Trustee La Torre.
Thank you, President Medina. Thank you to our guests for this meeting tonight. Thank you guys for being here and sharing your thoughts and opinions. First, I just want to thank the 12 elementary schools that I visited on back to school night last Thursday. All 12 campuses are open. I made it. Came scraping into the 12th school, barely made it, but the door was still unlocked and they welcomed me. And it's probably one of the most rewarding opportunities we can partake in as a board member is visiting our sites and spending time with our teachers and staff and administrators and families. I had about 10 minutes to speak with a teacher at Hidden Valley who has given us 30 years teaching our children and will be retiring after this year. And it just struck me that she mentioned I was the first board member she had ever met that ever came to her classroom. And it shouldn't be like that. We're a part of the community. We should be making connections and strengthening those connections and respecting our community enough to have those conversations and make sure the information gets where it needs to get. And I was really glad and grateful that she was able to share with me things that had worked, things that are working, things that aren't working, and things that she can foresee in the future to being a part of the process. So great experience. Thank you to all the 12 campuses that welcomed me. I will be at all 4 middle schools tomorrow night. So my family might actually get to see me tomorrow from only going to 4. So middle schools, here I come. And the next thing I want to talk about, it's with a heavy heart. Our community is still struggling with violent outbreaks that are making their ways onto our school campuses, and that's just not okay. It hurts my heart that we have children in our community that are in a traumatic place enough that they feel that violently pursuing others is the answer for one harm or another, or that we do have children that feel it's necessary to weaponize themselves to be on the school campus. We need to do better. We need to do better as a community to find these children, connect with these children, help these children, and help their hearts through the process so that school is a place they want to be, that they want to go to class and not worry about getting in an altercation with somebody else, that the more important thing is going to class and getting an education and partaking in extracurricular activities and going to the games and supporting their friends and making connections and being part of a positive process. That's what this district needs to do. That's what this community needs to do, is connect with these children. I also would be remiss if I did not mention today is September 11th. And 23 years ago, the atrocities that took place on American soil and the lives lost was not okay. And a lot of people will say never forget. And what I ask is that you remember everything. You don't just remember what happened on 9/11. You remember the lives that were lost. You remember the first responders and citizens that went into danger to try and save others. And a lot of people will talk about, I want America to be the way it was September 12th. But I also want you to remember that date. Because of what happened on 9/11, a lot of this country chose to react in fear and hate and inflict abuses on our Middle Eastern citizens and guests. And that's not okay. That's not who we are as a culture. That's not who I want us to be. So when we go through things like that, we're not looking, we get over centralized with the good, the bad, the white cowboy hat, the black cowboy hat. We're all humans. We're all learning, we're all growing, and we need to connect each other with love and find opportunities to grow and strengthen and not just remember a specific situation, but remember what happens after. How do we treat people? How do we present ourselves to people? How do we speak to people? How do we hold space for others to have the conversations they need to have? So when I remember and honor 9/11, I ask that you all remember everything that happened in that time and not just bits and pieces, and that we don't wait another year or 23 years to be better people from it.
Other board members? Comments? Seeing none? We will move on. Student board member, any report? Floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you for being here. I wanted to add on to what Dr. Morales said about the voter registration drives that our high schools are doing. Youth Activism Club at Santa Rosa High School is doing their voter registration drive the week of the 23rd. We are pre-registering to vote our 16 and 17-year-old students and registering to vote our 18-year-old seniors. We are doing that through tabling at breaks and lunch, and we're also educating students on the importance of what it means to vote in this day and age. I'm also participating in a lot of debates and having a lot of conversations in my government class about this election, how important it is and what values entail. So just putting that out there and letting y'all know. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Zuniga. With that said, we will now move on to public comments on non-agenda items. So if you have a comment on a non-agenda item, please make sure to complete a blue card and get it turned in here. I have a few. I'm going to be calling out 3 names at a time. When I call your name, you could go to one of the podiums up there to make your comment. So first I have Vanessa Bodine Tuguazi, followed by Holly Redsinger, followed by Kristen Isaacs, and you will have 2 minutes to comment. Vanessa,
All right.
go ahead.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Vanessa Bodine Tognazi, and I'm a mother of 2 daughters, ages 7 and 11, who attend Hidden Valley Elementary. I'm a local pediatric nurse and my husband a local firefighter. We rely heavily on after-school care due to our unpredictable schedules and last-minute shift changes. Our daughters were among the first students to become a part of the Hidden Valley Boys and Girls Club. However, recently, our daughters were both dropped unexpectedly and without notice from their Boys and Girls Club at their school. We did not even get an email explaining this was happening to us. I found out secondhand from a neighbor whose child had been turned away when they tried to go after school. We are among many, many families across multiple schools that were left scrambling for childcare. We were then told we would have to sign back up to be put on the wait list behind everyone else who had since been added to the wait list after our initial enrollment last year. My husband and I struggled to make ends meet when our daughters were in after-school care. And prior to this, my older daughter sat on the wait list for 3 years before she was enrolled in the after-school daycare. They provided childcare, but no help with homework, which left my daughters doing homework late at night and putting them at a disadvantage to their peers. When the Boys and Girls Club opened up, it was an opportunity for my daughters to get the help that they needed with homework while still receiving care after school hours. My daughters absolutely love the Boys and Girls Club, and they have been devastated by being cast to the side like this. They do not understand why they can no longer go. When we first signed up for the Boys and Girls Club, we were informed that we qualified for the program, but couldn't be given specifics as to why. And we were also never informed that there was a possibility we would be dropped from the program, especially when our circumstances have not changed. I understand and absolutely agree that the Boys and Girls Club must first serve qualifying families such as low income before being able to enroll non-qualified
Vanessa,
families.
thank you. Your time is up, but I will ask.
On the website, it said 3 minutes, sorry.
It's up to 3 minutes, but when during closed session, we established 2 minutes, and so then it has to remain that way for the rest of the meeting. But I will ask if we could follow up with this parent. Your number's on the card, so I'll see if we could have somebody follow up to find out more about that situation. Thank you. Next, I have Holly Redsinger, followed by Kristen Isaacs, followed by Micah Carlin Goldberg.
Hi, my name is Holly Retzinger, and I'm an English and Ethnic Studies and ALD teacher at Pioneer High School. However, tonight I'm here to speak to you as a parent of a 7th grader at Slater Middle School. I want the board to know how difficult and distressing the massive schedule changes and teacher transfers have been for our students, teachers, parents, and other staff and community members, not just at Slater, but at other schools in our district. First, I want to acknowledge the positive. My daughter Rosie's had a very promising transition to middle school at Slater. She has nothing but good things to say about her teachers and her basketball coach. There are so many good things to say about Slater, and I'm so thankful for everything these amazing educators do every day for my daughter and all of our students. However, after adjusting so well this school year, my daughter was very stressed about the prospect of having her schedule changed during the first 4 weeks of school. She came home with stories of teachers being fired or moved to other schools. She even told me about one teacher who's now teaching at 2 different schools. Now, I do take all 12-year-old intel with a grain of salt, but this made me curious, to say the least. In the end, as an advanced math and English student, my daughter's schedule was not changed. But all 8 of her closest friends, who happen not to be in advanced classes, did have their schedules changed. This made me suspicious. I've since learned that much of the disruption seems to have impacted our most vulnerable and struggling students at Slater. Our ALD teacher was involuntarily transferred to teach at an elementary school. She was also the teacher who was planning to teach an intervention program that Principal Ryan Partika was spearheading to support students in need of extra social, emotional, and academic support. This intervention program was terminated. This is a big loss for Slater, which I'm sure you know is in dire need of more, not
Thank you.
less support for those students who are having the most trouble.
Thank you. Your time is up. Next, we have Kristen Isaacs, followed by Micah Carlin Goldberg, followed by Annabelle Nunez.
Good evening, Dr. Morales and the board members. My name is Kristen Isaacs, and I proudly serve as CSEA Regional Rep for the Region 24, which Santa Rosa City Schools is a part of. I also serve as the Vice President for CSEA Chapter Petaluma 212, and I am also an instructional assistant at Petaluma City Schools in Petaluma. I am here tonight to urge you to do everything in your power to provide a fair and equitable raise to your classified staff. We have 14 CSEA chapters in Region 24, and we are bonding together to support our siblings here in Santa Rosa. Our desire is to prioritize the underpaid and the underappreciated people in our county. CSEA is stepping forward to say that we will not be invisible anymore, and we appreciate all that you can do to support your classifieds in your district, and we thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Micah Carlin Goldberg, followed by Annabelle Nunez.
Good evening, everyone. I want to start by reminding people that prior to the COVID lockdowns, we had 3 minutes to comment. And during the COVID lockdowns, when we had hundreds of comments, it was shortened to 2 minutes. I'm kind of disturbed that we're still sticking with 2 minutes so people don't get enough time to talk. I'm a sixth grade teacher at Steel Lane Elementary. We are the largest school, elementary school in the district, and we are continuing to grow in spite of claims otherwise that happened at the end of last year and earlier this year. We currently have 455 students. And 2 weeks ago, we had a teacher taken away from us. We had 3 third grade and 3 second grade classes. And the decision from the district, a week before we got our new administrator, was to collapse 2 of those classes into a 2-3 combo because they needed a teacher to take on the 5th grade that still had a vacancy. This took us from classes of 22 and 23 to a combo with 24 and other classes that have 25 and 26 students in them. This may not seem like a lot, but this grade level, second and third, are some of the students who've had the worst impacts from COVID affect their academics and behavior. Putting them into fewer classes has exacerbated this problem. Also, we did this 2 weeks into the school year. So we had all these students who had bonded to their teachers, including one teacher who had moved from 5th grade to 3rd grade after requesting this for 6 years. And has now been moved back to 5th grade. His students were crying in the hallway that they were not able to keep him as their teacher. This is the impact of the decisions that you have made. I'm worried that you're not working with real data because SRTA on my behalf put an information request in before those transfers happened about what were the class sizes at all the schools, and we finally got a response yesterday. I would hope that you'd have the data for yourself. We've got too many kids who are getting impacted by cuts at the school instead of away from them. Fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Annabelle Nunez.
Hi, my name is Annabelle Nunez. I'm a community member, a grandmother, and a mother here in Santa Rosa. I'm here to speak on our children's safety at their schools when it comes to the disciplinary action steps and allowing police officers to question our children without their parents' consent or legal representation. We need to do better for our children. I'm sure you guys are all aware of the school to prison pipeline. And just by seeing like the lack of outrage from, parents from like what happened at Montgomery, where's everybody at today? It's our LC students. Just like when I go to city council and people are fighting for bike trails, or bike paths, and when we've asked for sidewalks for our students to be able to walk from Moreland to Elsie because a student was already killed a few years ago, we still have nothing. What about our children? The children of color? Who represents us? There was a police officer questioning a minor. Had she spoken or said anything, charges could have gone against her. She would have been held as an accessory. And I don't know law. I only know from experience, from incidents and things that have happened to people that I love and who have been incarcerated. Prop 36 is on the ballot this year that's going to cut funds to community-based organizations. And in turn, it's going to cost California taxpayers $26 billion over the next decade. And that will go into the prison system. We need to do better.
Thank you, Ms. Nunez. That is all the public comments that I have. We will move on the agenda into our F, discussion and action items. First on the agenda, we have item F1, resolution to recognize September 15th through October 15th as Latinx Heritage Month. I will pass this to Trustee De La Cruz.
Thank you so much, Board President Medina. I'm also super excited to invite some students up to the table here who are going to participate. Thank you so much to Heather and some awesome Pioneer teachers for getting folks in the mix tonight. And I think what we're going to do is I'm going to make a couple of comments about the resolution. Is there a copy of the resolution available to our students? On the agenda, but I mean for them sitting there. Because I was thinking that I could read the resolution, but it would be really beautiful to have our students read the resolution. And then they're going to join us in a little bit of a discussion about what the resolution means for them. Sound good? Yay, okay. So I'm so excited and so proud as a Chicana and as a mom in this district and as a board member to take up this work tonight and to celebrate the powerful contributions of people of the Latin American diaspora in our country, and that we continue the important work to understand the history and the meaning behind the changing ways in which we define ourselves, recognizing that there's no monolithic Latinx or Latino or Hispanic identity, but it's really critical for us to keep having really curious conversations as a community about what these words mean. And it's particularly important to us because out of our 14,700 students, about 8,700 or 59% of our students are Latinx, or any of the other kind of identities that flow from being part of the Latin American diaspora. The other function of having these resolutions and having these conversations in our annual calendar is to make sure that we as an educational institution are doing our best to share what we know and the lived experiences of people who can speak to what it means to have these identities impact our lives and impact the way that we move through the world. And as an educational institution, I'm so proud to be able to do that tonight because it really begins a conversation. And these conversations can raise questions that people might have. We can answer questions, but we can be curious and we can be in community with each other. I love being asked how I identify. I don't love when people choose an identity for me that doesn't necessarily match the way that I see my experiences and my history and what it is that I love to hang on to. From Hispanic to Latino to Latinx to Chicano to Latinx, from Boricua, right? We've had diverse thinkers in our larger community who have really been challenging for a long time the boxes that institutions have put into place to define us and to continue to make, and to own our agency in helping to make decisions about the terminology that's really rooted in a recognition of who we are in this moment in time and what that history looks like for our people. And so for decades, for centuries, this conversation, has gone on, and I'm excited to continue it. So this conversation, Hispanic Heritage Week, started out as a week, began in 1968, and President Lyndon Johnson signed a presidential proclamation launching a week-long celebration to, quote, honor the great contribution to our national heritage made by our people of Hispanic descent. And I raised the year 1968 because at the time of this presidential proclamation, it was the height of militant and nationalist young brown people who had been organizing now for decades. And these movements were really active and they were flourishing throughout the country, from the Brown Berets to the Latin Kings to the Young Lords, young Chicanos and Boricuas and Dominicanos and other members of the Latin American diaspora living in the United States were actively organizing in their communities to further self-determination and the liberation of third world peoples in the United States. And these groups, although their members represented lots of different places in Latin America, they were united in their anti-racism and also recognizing that so much of the love that they had for their communities and challenging these kind of boxes that were put into place was really grounded in a celebration of African and indigenous roots. And, at this time, a lot of those brown power groups were also working in solidarity with Black Panthers, with Native American leaders, and with Asian American movements groups. So it was a really exciting time in our country's history. And so the choice of the word Hispanic in 1968 was a really interesting one, because what it did and what it felt like to some folks in these groups who were organizing was an attempt to erase, right, some of that connection to both home countries, to eradicate that nationalist fervor and that pride that was coming from people coming from different countries throughout Latin America, as well as trying to erase those African and indigenous roots. And instead, to connect them to European colonial empires who left them a common language, but also left those countries and those people with a history of genocide, of slavery, and of land theft. And so the federal government's choice around using this term Hispanic was cemented in 1988 when President Ronald Reagan proclaimed Hispanic Heritage Month. And so really thinking about how government categorizes people is such a moment for critical thinking, right? That's also really grounded in history and knowing histories that sometimes aren't always told because they're about folks who don't necessarily always hold positions of authority or of power or of decision-making or of writing the history books themselves. And so, the history of these choices and these decisions is really fascinating, and it continues, right? As we hear people kind of choosing and changing the words that people have used to identify us. And this is a really critical conversation because this is ultimately about representation, right? These moments of celebration. And I want to thank Martin Espinosa from the Press Democrat, who just shared some data with me as he's working on a story about representation in Sonoma County. And he shared today that of the 84 elected offices in Sonoma County, and that's not counting special districts, only 6 are held by people who identify as Latinx or Hispanic. That's 7% as compared to the county's nearly 30% Latinx or Hispanic population. So I just really want to thank Martin for shining some light on these questions of representation that are so critical as we think about what it means to truly celebrate the contributions of our community, of the Latinx community, of the Chicano community, of the Mexican American community, of the Hispanic community, of the Puerto Rican community, of all the different, beautiful ways that people identify as part of this larger community. And so it should also send us a message that, yes, tiempo para ponernos las pilas, and to really make sure that we are continuing to shine light on those places that require, us to stand up for ourselves, for our communities, to play those critical roles of representation that really come from recognizing and celebrating the lived experiences of people who, might share an identity or a language or some experiences as a result of the way the world sees us, but also as a result of the way we experience the world. So with that, I'm going to move to the actual resolution, and I'd love to pass it over to our incredible students tonight. if you'd like to share the words of this board in Resolution 2024-25-09 that recognizes September 15th to October 15th as Latinx Heritage Month.
Resolution recognizing September 15 to October 15, 2024 as Latinx Heritage Month. Whereas the Latinx community has a long and important history of commitment to our nation's core values, and the contributions of this community have helped make our country great. Whereas the United States Congress approved Public Law 90-498 in 1968 to designate the week of September 15th as National Hispanic Heritage Week. Whereas in 1988, the United States Congress passed Public Law 100-402, which embedded Pub L 90-498 and established National Hispanic Heritage Month. Whereas the term Hispanic both celebrates the colonization and erases African and indigenous roots of the people of Latin America. Whereas the Board of Trustees of Santa Rosa City Schools works to create a culture of belonging in our school community. Whereas the terms to use to define people's individual and collective identities are both personal and institutional choices. Whereas the Board of Trustees of Santa Rosa City Schools chooses to utilize Latinx or Latin terms that reflect the diversity in the individuals in our community who have Latin American roots in this resolution, and invites community conversation around these choices. Whereas the Latinx population in the United States is projected to grow to 107 million people by 2065, at which point the Latinx population will comprise more than 24% of the total population of the United States. Whereas in 2018, there were more than 18,701,184 Latinx children under the age of 18 under 18 years of age in the United States, which represents approximately a third of the total Latinx population in the United States. Whereas nationwide, Latinx cast approximately 16.6 million votes in 2020, an increase of 30.9% over the 2016 presidential election. Whereas the number of eligible Latinx voters is expected to rise to 40 million by 2030, accounting for 40% of the growth in the eligible electorate in the United States by 2032. Whereas in the 2020 census, the Latinx population accounted for 28.3% of the total population in Sonoma County. Whereas understanding Latinx history and culture is an important part of celebrating Latinx Heritage Month. Whereas the September-October period covers a wide range of Independence Days for the Latin American countries of Central America, South America, and Caribbean, and Mexico. Whereas Latinx Heritage Month celebrates the history and culture of our nation's Latinx and acknowledges their influence on politics, the economy, and the social and cultural life throughout the United States. Whereas throughout our history, Latinx Americans have enriched the American way of life, and we recognize the millions of Latinx Americans who love a family, hard work, and community have helped unite us as people and sustain us as a nation. Whereas as entrepreneurs and public servants, scholars, and artists, Latinx Americans have provided wisdom, energy, and leadership to our communities and to our country. Whereas the California State Board of Education recognized in its multicultural education policy that each student needs an opportunity to understand the common humanity underlying all people. And whereas the history social science framework for the California Public Schools, kindergarten through grade 12, states that the history curriculum of community, state, region, nation, and world must reflect the experience of men and women of different racial, religious, and ethnic groups, which is integrated at every level. Now therefore, be it resolved, on September 11, 2024, the Santa Rosa City Schools Board of Education proclaims the month of September 15 to October 15, 2024 as Latinx Heritage Month, and encourages all district schools to commemorate this occasion with appropriate institutional activities and passed and adopted by the following vote of the governing board of Santa Rosa City Schools, County of Sonoma, State of California on September 11, 2024.
Okay, but if we're gonna clap for that resolution, we actually have to do it by leaning on some history that comes from, one of the most successful movements for brown folks, from people from Latin America, from the farm workers movement. And so I'm gonna invite you all, instead of doing a clap like that, we're gonna do an aplauso campesino or a unity clap, right? Does everybody know how that goes? Every little person starts, and when we come together, we make ourselves heard, and we have unity. Que viva Santa Rosa City Schools Board. Thank you. Thank you so much, Luis. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, because you're sitting up here with all this beautiful knowledge, and I know you had some words that you wanted to share with our board, so I invite you to be part of this conversation. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
I don't particularly identify as part of the Latinx community, but I would really say my ethnic studies English class last year really made me feel more knowledgeable about the stuff that I was ignorant to in the past, and it really integrated me into the culture that I've been present in, as California is has a very dominant Latin community. So reading words of literature from people like Luis Rodriguez and like Always Running was really like encouraging, just like seeing the Hispanic experience from like one lens. It's not everyone's, but it was like a pretty good piece of writing that really showed me other people's experiences and how, despite our different cultures and different places of origin and ethnicities, we do have similar experiences in life as people of color in this country. And I would say the class itself really taught me about other people's experiences. And I really enjoyed having a class that really taught me about the people around me, and not just about literature and English as a language, but English as the people who speak it. And it's not just a particular culture, it's all of us. So I would say I really enjoyed being in the class, as it was really like encouraging and inspiring, just seeing other people's experiences as well as interacting with different cultures at the same time, and informing myself of the stuff I was blind to and ignorant to in the past, and things that I might have been insensitive to, unaware of as well. So I would say that's been the best part of being in the class.
I'm mixed. I'm Guatemalteco Mexicano, but growing up, I never like understood what that really meant. But I usually shied away from like embracing my culture. But when I transferred to Mr. Staten's ethnic studies class, like it really like shined a light in me. Um, we learned we learn not only like the roots of Latin America, we also learn Asian American, African American history. It was like, as much as I don't want to admit it, I was insensitive to all that. My mind was stereotypical at times, but being able to know the truth like really brought it out to me. And as far as what I learned in Latin America history, like I really learned like how to embrace my culture, and it feels nice because back then I wouldn't relate to like any as much stuff as I wanted to. I wouldn't interact. I wouldn't go to any events. Not that I didn't want to, but I just like I didn't feel like I was a part of the community. But learning my roots and learning who I really am, like it brought me more happiness in my life. I learned to be a better person. I learned to be more involved in my community, and I hope to be pursuing that more often in the future.
These young people came here tonight not knowing that they would be the ones reading the land acknowledgement and reading the resolution. And I kind of want to ask you, do you think you would have been prepared to do that last year?
Not really. I don't think I would feel comfortable speaking on something I wasn't really informed on. But like speaking, this wasn't the first time reading it. So it was like nice because as much as it was something I knew it was there, but like I never really like interacted with it as much as I did in the class. And we had to like read it and like ask ourselves, what have you really done about this acknowledgement? Yes, we read it, but how do you feel about it after? So like really dissecting it in the classroom made me more comfortable with acknowledging the fact that yes, I love the place that I live, but it once was inhabited by other people and it's not like place that I like deserve. Like I'm lucky to be in the place that I am in right now, and acknowledging that in the classroom and outside of it really helped me being more comfortable and being able to read it today.
Thank you, Melissa. Luis, do you want to say something to you?
A year ago, I definitely wouldn't be able to like comment on this because back then it would just be a line of text. Like I wouldn't understand the real meaning behind it, but digging into it more further, knowing like the actual stories, not just the dominant narratives, but also the non-dominant, like I'm more knowledgeable and I'm more comfortable and confident in my knowledge.
So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that there are other individuals at this table, some adults. We don't always love to hear from the adults as much as the youth, but they would not be here if not for these amazing teachers. So Ben Staten, who teaches at Santa Rosa High School, and Holly Retzinger at Piner. We have a couple other ethnic studies teachers in the room. We'll lift them up another time, but thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for making our kind of consideration and soaking in all this wonderful information around this resolution and this month so meaningful. So super grateful to you all. Thank you so much. If folks have more questions about, terminology and language and words, hopefully we've shared a little bit about why Santa Rosa City Schools has chosen the word Latinx to reflect a more inclusive understanding of who we are as a community, as communities, and recognizing the importance of also challenging kind of the gendered language of Spanish, right? The O and the A. The X is really designed to be much more inclusive and to recognize that our communities are also identify in lots of different ways when it comes to gender and sexuality. And so this is, our district's attempt to really to reflect that inclusion, to continue building that culture of belonging. And I'm just so grateful tonight for your presence here on this resolution. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. President Medina, I'll turn it back to you.
And I'll turn to the board. Are there questions, comments before I do? No. I think a few things. I think first off, thank you, Luis and Melissa and everybody that presented. I think Luis, when you were speaking about kind of that confusion as to who you are and your culture, it took me back to when I was young, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. That period of time was very difficult for me as identity was something that I didn't understand. Being told that I should be like white people, yet not seen by the community as that, not having, like really being pushed to acculturate and to assimilate while knowing that I was different, yet not necessarily understanding my culture fully. That's when, fortunately for me, I was introduced to Chicano studies by folks at Sonoma State and other places. That really, it was in '94 that I first got incepted the thought of bringing that to our schools. And part of why I'm here today is from stuff that happened to me way back then. So I'm glad to see where we are. I still think we have a long way to go in terms of what we teach in our schools and the opportunities that we provide our students to learn. But we're definitely a long way from when we were then. I think, Melissa, you mentioned Luis Rodriguez and Always Running, and that was a book that I read. And I think soon after that, I think this district was trying to ban it. I don't know if they actually did at one point, but there was a movement to ban that specific book. So I relate to you reading that book and the story because that really touched and connected with me. Trustee La Cruz, you mentioned 1968, one of my favorite years in history. But it took me back to a poem by Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez around that time, I Am Joaquin, and it starts off by saying, I am Joaquin, lost in a world of confusion. And that's often how many of us feel. And as he goes down through that poem, it's about learning about our culture and our history and all the good things that exist in there. And for me, a part of teaching ethics studies in our schools, it's not just about breaking down barriers and helping students understand the cultures of other students, but it's also about empowering oneself to be a stronger person, to take pride in their culture, to see who you are, because we often don't get that. And I think once we understand our culture, our culture is a source of strength and pride that helps us be better people. So I think as it relates to the resolution, I think it's important to understand the importance of representation. Trustee La Cruz talked about Martina Espinosa's current work on an article around representation. And this district always referenced this period of time as Hispanic Heritage Month until 2019, right after Steffi Manieri and I were elected and Trustee La Cruz were appointed, where there was representation that understood the differences on that. And so I think it's important to recognize that in terms of the history of this district and where we are today versus many, many years in the past. So with that said, I don't see any public comment cards. I bring it back to the board for further comment, questions, motion. Shall I entertain a motion?
I'd like to move to approve Resolution 2425-09, recognizing September 15th to October 15th as Latinx Heritage Month.
Second.
So that was moved by Trustee De La Cruz, seconded by Trustee Flores. Any comment, discussion? Let's go to the vote.
Student Board Member Zaninga,
Aye.
Trustee De La Cruz,
See.
Trustee Flores,
Aye.
Trustee Sheffield,
Aye.
Trustee McNally. Aye. Trustee De La Torre,
Aye.
President Medina.
See. Thank you. Motion carries. And with that, we'll move on to item F2, our 2023-24 unaudited actuals. And for that, we'll have Lisa and August and Joel Dantos presenting.
Good evening, President Medina, Dr. Morales, members of the board, the SRCS community. Thank you so much for the opportunity this evening to present to you the 23-24 unaudited actuals. Joel and I will go ahead and kind of alternate going through here as usual, and then we'll be happy to take questions and discussion. We are always interested in hearing what we can do to improve the communication and transparency. So to get us started, again, our cycle, you'll see this every time from us. I know it's a little repetitive, but I think it's great to remind people that this is an ongoing process, that as President Howell mentioned earlier, this is the only time when our numbers are real, as in they are final. For the most part, they will still be subject to audit because these are our unaudited actuals. So they're, any audited adjustments would come forward later. However, we have not been having those issues. So in September, we do actually find out where we ended the prior year. The next time you'll hear from us is in December with the first interim financial report as far as this particular information. So a reminder, this is the only time during the year also that we do not do a multi-year projection. This is looking to the past. It is not anything looking to current finances or to the future. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Joel for the next few.
Thank you. Good evening, President Medina, Superintendent, Morales, Dr. Morales, and members of the board. So tonight I'll go over how the revenues ended when we closed the books with these unaudited actuals compared to where we're at with the estimated actuals. And I'll just touch base. There were some minor changes, and I'll touch base on the impacting factors into those. So here we're looking at the combined unrestricted and restricted sources. So we have in all our financial reports, we have unrestricted and restricted, and our unrestricted are majorly our LCFF revenue and other state, and our restricted are categorical programs. So this slide will help us look at mostly our federal revenues, because if we only look at, and we're going to follow up on the next slide with only looking at the unrestricted, but this will help illustrate what's happening in these revenues. So you can see the federal revenues, they show a decrease compared to estimated actuals. We leave the expenditures in the federal programs and allowing those to be spent through July 1st. However, if they're not spent by July 1st, those revenues can carry over and we have a chance to spend those in 24, 25. So that's really what's going on in the restricted areas. So we can move on to the next slide. You can see, you know, we had a slight modification when we closed the books. I can say the LCFF sources, what is contributing to that is in the latter part of the year, we did do CalPAD's revision to our unduplicated pupil account, and we captured these extra revenues. Now, we include those in the budget, but when we get our annual apportionment, we're going to probably see those revenues coming in 24, 25. So this is something to look at, and we'll report back on this with first interim. But that's something that's impacting these closed out LCFF sources. And then you can see other state revenue. We had the major impacting factor of those. We had our final calculations for our home transportation cost reimbursement, which is based on this year's actual expenditures. And then we had some updates in other finance sources. Now, what's going on here is those actually, when we close the books, you'll see some impacts in the other outgo in expenditures. When we closed the books, we made some transfers in other outgoing expenditures instead of in this other financing sources. I'm sorry, did you? Oh, I thought saw you waved to me. Okay. So, and then the contributions, those are just the final transfers to our maintenance, our 3% contribution to maintenance, and then our special ed costs.
So just as a representation, the majority of our unrestricted revenues are from LCFF, other state. So that would be many of our grants like CTE funding, things like that at 4%, and other local 3.5%. That can be a combination of facilities fees, you know, as far as rental fees. It can also be some E-rate reimbursements, donations, all kinds of things like that. So just kind of the miscellaneous pot there. So that's only about 3.5% of our unrestricted revenues. And out of our restricted revenues, it's really pretty evenly split. So federal and then our state, especially in this year when we were spending out the remainder of the one-time COVID funds from both the federal and state levels. And then other local and restricted is typically that those would be grants. Specifically that are restricted grants or restricted donations.
Thank you. So here we are again, just there were some adjustments between estimated and actual, so I'll go over the contributing factors in these. So when you're looking at our labor, which is certificate salaries, classified salaries, employee benefits, this is really our largest area of expenditures. So the impact really is, the major impacts are just there was some final end of the year supplemental pay that came through, and then some summer school final numbers, but really this is just like 1,000 cuts, 5 paper cuts. Is that the right term? There's so many factors that go into this. This is really kind of just the real numbers. I would say the major contributing factors to books and supplies is we do have department and school side discretionary budgets that they have an opportunity to spend down those. So sweeping those until the last minute is, and that happened during the close. I will say there's this other outgo. What happened with that is that difference is, so all our mental health revenues come through our SELPA. And when we get, part of our close process is we do have Sonoma County Office of Education work with SELPA, and they send all the school districts their closeout adjustments. And this was some of those closeout adjustments due to our mental health revenues that come in. And this year there was some change in that. So that's really what that other outgo is. But the revenues and expenditures with that mental health were as budgeted and predicted, but they had to do some journal entries in that line. And then that other outgo is kind of what I was talking about in those revenues, where we moved out from the other finance sources into this other outgo chance. So that is really what is the major impacting components into the unadded actuals from the estimated actuals.
And just calling out that the total, Gesundheit, bless you, the salaries and benefits make up 82.5% of our unrestricted general fund expenditures. When you exclude the indirect cost and the other outgo, those are really transfers. Our services and operating expenses, 16.2%, and our books and supplies at 1.3%. So really, when you look at the major operations of the district, it's salaries and benefits. And then the services and operations costs, those are going to be many things, including software purchases, like our online purchases. That's also utilities, all of those things that are those ongoing expenses of that nature. And then just a representation of the dollar amount of what that looks like. So $188 million between restricted and unrestricted. So total in General Fund 01 in salaries and benefits, books and supplies, 5.3 million, services and operating expenses, about 57 million, and capital outlay, 402,000. Capital outlay in this is going to be really, you're talking about equipment, you're talking about some improvements and things of that nature.
Okay, so now the final component of the report is the ending fund balance. And you can see there was a difference. So again, for the ending fund balance, we've included the combined unrestricted, and then we'll follow up with the unrestricted slide again to help tell the story. So you can see we ended with an increase of 994,000 compared to the estimated actuals in the ending fund balance. But a good amount of this in restricted will move forward as a restricted reserve. And if you want to go to the next slide. So you can see when the final numbers with the close came out, we did increase by about 30,000 the reserve for economic uncertainty, which is 3% of the total final expenditures. So that number, it depends on the final closed books expenditure amount. So that actually, with some of the decreases in the expenditures, for example, those expenditures that are allowed to move to 24, 25 and such, that also has a resulting in decrease to our 3% reserve for economic uncertainty. So our total unrestricted reserve did increase by about $223,693.
So right here is what President Howell alluded to earlier, which is the other assignments, $11 million. That was reflected in the budget and estimated actuals as being used in 24-25 for expenses. That's basically, this is our deficit spending. This is our structural deficit. And so we carried over those funds from 23-24 to be spent out in 24-25 to meet only our minimum reserve of 3%. And that's based on those reductions that we made last year during our fiscal stabilization plan process. We put it into other assignments in unaudited actuals, actually in order to provide some more transparency and identify specifically why that is and what that's called out for. This was a practice that I'm used to doing. And so as we're looking at things and trying to figure out how do we message in a way that provides clarity, that's the reason for this. And so if there are items like this in the future, you will see them reflected in that way. We will always try to be as descriptive as possible, but we are limited on the space when we're adding that information in there. So that is something that we can provide a little more clarity for in the narrative, which there's more detail attached in the report that was attached to the presentation, which we will have translated due to the timing of when we had to get everything finalized and ready for the board. We did not have time to get translation on that. So we will upload that at a later time to our fiscal page on our website. We are providing budget documents and information on there in the future. So please look for those. And just want to thank President Hell for the acknowledgement for our fiscal team. They really do spend many, many hours going line by line through all of our expenditures to make sure that they are coded to the most appropriate resource, looking to protect our unrestricted funds as much as possible and coding things to restricted. It really, from the time that we finished school in June until literally the Friday before the board meeting, that work is taking place. So thank you.
Board questions? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so this is our ending condition in all our other funds. What we went over was the general operating fund 01. So these are our other funds. You're familiar with some of these. One thing is the charter schools. They had a increase in their fund balance. The Child Development Fund 12, that was, we did move the expanded learning opportunities into that. So there was a minor change in the end result related to the summer school. Our cafeteria continues to be really healthy with this with this new universal meals for all and the revenues. We're still getting a real good stronghold on those budgets, but there's a great thing going on by the state to fund that program. You can see our capital facilities, our developer fees. We did spend some of those to get ready for this year's school. We did spend some Fund 40 on some facilities things to get ready for this year that we updated. And our self-insurance fund closed with less claims than we anticipated. And, we've been able to use that equity. So we'll continue to monitor that.
I did want to speak to the spending down in the capital facilities fund, so developer fees and the special reserve for capital outlay. Those were specifically related to, excuse me, the special education classrooms and TK. So adding some spaces there for students that actually are recaptured or captured coming into the district. Our next steps, we are hard at work with our Fiscal Stabilization Committee, formerly the Budget Advisory Committee. If you recall, I believe I mentioned that they thought that name would be more appropriate. We are working between September and November on drafting our fiscal stabilization plan and making those recommendations to the superintendent. We are having our School Consolidation Advisory Committee meetings. We are getting ready with Ed Services to excuse me, have our LCAP and budget roadshow presentations start back up. That will be beginning, I believe, the end of October and beginning of November. In December, you will hear from us with our first interim budget report. we will continue with our Fiscal Stabilization Committee meetings because this is an ongoing issue that we need to address our structural deficit and really right size our district and, make sure that we are righting the ship to go forward in a fiscally stable manner. And again, we continue with the Consolidation Advisory Committee meetings, Budget Roadshow, and then in January, you will have the governor's budget proposal, continued meetings. We will be wrapping up in February, the Schools Consolidation Advisory Committee, and making those recommendations to the board. And then in March, you'll see second interim, and we will continue the cycle from there. Thank you very much, and I will stop sharing and turn it back over to you, President Medina.
Thank you. Board, now, are there questions? Trustee Flores?
Thank you, President Medina, and thank you for that presentation. Going back to SRTA's question regarding the other assignments, can you explain, that's on slide number 10. Can you explain what that is?
Yes, so what that is, it was identified at the end of last year that we would be, essentially we'd have $11 million left from the transfer of unrestricted spending into those restricted funds at the ESSER and ELOG and all of those other things. When we identify, we had some Title I to be spent out. When we can move any expenditures from unrestricted into restricted, that frees up those funds. That then carried over to this year for us to be able to actually meet our 3% and not have a negative projection for the current year. So that's essentially assigned for the operating expenses for this year that we will be overspending compared to our revenues.
Can I just add the deadline for spending those one-time revenues was by the end of this year?
And many of those expired actually September 30th.
Is that it, Trustee Flores? You done? Other board questions? Trustee Sheffield?
I've kind of been waiting for this meeting because I had a question that has kind of been lingering as we go into the start of this school year and know that we're spending down the remainder of the COVID funds and wondering, what was the remainder used for, and then where might we see the impact of no longer having those funds?
Well, some of those impacts were mentioned earlier during public comment. And that is that we have staffed up over the last several years and kept that staffing level while we had declining enrollment. And so those funds were used for ongoing increases for salaries. They were used for ongoing staffing as far as maintaining staffing levels, providing additional services. So it's a combination of many things. It had to do with Chromebooks, with, all of those things that we are now having to really tighten our belts on.
Yeah.
And those were some of the recommendations in the fiscal stabilization plan. It's also why we did have to do something that we haven't typically done here in the past, which is rather than continuing to try to recruit additional teachers, if we find that we are under enrolled at one site, compared to projections. So where we projected at the beginning, well, really we're establishing staffing levels in the prior spring before we really know how many students are going to show up. And so once we hit that first couple of weeks of school, we have the first 15 days to make those adjustments. And we understand that it's painful for our community, for our schools, our staff, our students, our families. It's never what we want to do, but we are in a fiscal situation where we don't have a choice. We can't continue to hire additional staff and maintain staffing that is over or a specific credential is needed at a different site because we have a shortage there and maybe students who are not aligned in the right credentialing, the right assignment at another school site.
Right.
And so really that's where we're seeing that impact, is not being able to continue those same levels.
Yeah, and so, I know it was mentioned in one of the slides. Scroll back, I'm trying to find, it's not labeled out, but you had mentioned it, about services for students, behavioral, in specific, you called that one out. And how do we as a district face the reality that we no longer have federal funds for these much needed services, even 2 years out after the pandemic. But our kids are feeling it. So yeah, where do we make that up? And how do we continue to provide the services for the kids that need it?
And that's where involvement is going to be extremely important from our community. We really encourage people to come to our LCAP and budget roadshows to learn about what goes into that, how our funding works, and how the supplemental and concentration grant works, how we go through the prioritization process based on feedback that we get, which really the feedback part starts early in the year, like January, to develop the plans coming forward. In the past, only supplemental and concentration were prioritized based on the LCAP feedback. And really, we are using that as a way to identify what services in general are needed for students. And then identifying, okay, where do we have the funds that we can do this? And that helps us when we are bringing recommendations to you as the board to say, okay, here's the need that was identified from our community. And these are what we're recommending we put into the budget, whether it's from federal resources, state resources, grants, LCFF, or supplemental and concentration. So we're really doing we're having a more holistic approach and collaboration between ed services and fiscal. That does include actually other departments as well when we're talking about the prioritization. When we're working on that, that includes wellness and engagement and human resources, everybody working together to say, okay, here's what was identified as a priority. How can we make that happen, or how much of that can we make happen?
Yeah.
Because that's really what it comes down to, is that we're having to make difficult choices in what we recommend. And as a board, you're going to have to make even more difficult choices in what you approve and the direction that you give to us.
Right. And I want to amplify something that you said and hope that we continue to encourage the community to come out and really speak up. I know I brought this up at our last meeting that, we have, and it's not just our district.
No.
This is the reality, 2 years post-pandemic, a global crisis, right? We need to level set. We need to address the realities now that we have to get a hold of what it is that we really want. And we can't just lay it on this district to solve the problems. We can't solve all the societal problems. It really does require that community input. And as you said, getting folks out to the roadshow, absolutely. And just, like I said, I want to amplify that. I want to echo that. I want to make sure that we are, we're speaking as loudly and as directly to our school community as possible, that we really do need everybody out. We really do need input. We need solutions. We can't just point fingers. Thank you for the presentation. Always look forward to this one.
Thank you.
Trustee Flores?
So thank you once again. In terms of projections, right, we had a couple of folks go to the mic today and talk about how disrupted it's been. So how do we go about making a better or doing a better job at our projections matching what the actual show rate is to prevent these sort of mass disruptions? Can you talk a little bit about how can we go about and doing that a little bit more proactively?
Absolutely. And I will share that this year was much further off than we have ever been in the past. Typically, we've been pretty close, within enough that we didn't need to have, really big shifts. This year, the students really did not show up in the way that we expected. And there are many factors related to that. Some of it, in fact, we just spoke about this in the School Consolidation Committee on Monday. Our demographer was there and shared some information about, some of the housing, starts that were expected to open, didn't open, or they did, and the students that we would have projected would come with that did not materialize. We are, of course, in competition with all of our neighboring districts who have open charter schools, just as we have. There are a number of factors. Additionally, we staff based on every student showing up every day. That's what we have to staff on. And our ADA is not reflecting that. We have students who stay enrolled up until we start school and then they don't show up. And so that difference is pretty substantial. And as long as they're in our books, we have to project as if we're going to staff for them. And then when they actually aren't here, we have to adjust to that. Those are things that are we're looking at this year to say, okay, what's different about the trends this year? What happened that's different this year compared to how we've trended? We are adjusting right now our projections when we go into first interim to be based on the low end rather than the moderate for our enrollment projections going forward. So that's a huge adjustment because at budget time, we expected moderate. That's kind of how we trended up until that point. So again, it's looking at multiple sources, trying to find out, okay, is this a 1 year or is this an ongoing that we're going to see? And then also looking at our rates of attendance. How can we improve those? Because that helps the students. The more they can be here and receiving that, first best instruction in class, that's the best thing that we can do for them. It also happens to positively impact the bottom line, which then helps us to provide more services to kids. So that's a positive self-fulfilling prophecy when we can make that happen. Thank you.
Other board questions? This one might seem very insignificant, but Fund 73, I saw there was a slight adjustment, 840. I think those are self-sustaining funds, right? I'm just curious. We spent less, either did it earn more or did we spend less in those scholarships?
Can answer that. So this is a fund where we issue scholarships, and I think we can, I think there's an opportunity there. I think throughout the year, we get really busy and there's so many things, the LCAP, the unknown. I think that we could opportunity to put more focus on this Fund 73. So, it looks like, we had $173,000 anticipated ending balance, and we did end with about 173 anticipated ending balance. So the budgeting is not far off, but I think the activity in that fund could improve.
And one of the things that we need to keep in mind when we look at that is that many of those are donor directed. And so it may be that we are only able to award the interest, or, those are things that we have to look at. So that's part of the work that we'll continue to do. Thank you for bringing that up.
I think in understanding that, I believe with Fund 73, what's been explained is that it's donor directed based on having a trust. And so I'm curious, are there funds that have been donated to the district that are meant for scholarships that because they didn't have a trust, then we somehow used otherwise because we didn't have that restriction, or have we always used the funds as directed?
They would only be able to be used for scholarships. When they are donated with that specific purpose, that is all that they can be used for. They would never be used for something else.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have no more questions. I don't see any comment cards. If there's any other board questions, or is there a motion to accept the unaudited actuals? but I entertain a motion.
I was
Oh,
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
I will make the motion to approve the 2023-24 unaudited actuals.
Second.
Moved by trustee Sheffield, seconded by trustee De La Cruz. Any discussion? Seeing none. Let's go to the vote.
Student Board Member Zaninga.
Aye.
Trustee Sheffield.
Aye.
Trustee De La Cruz.
Aye.
Trustee McNally. Aye. Trustee Flores.
It disappeared.
Trustee De La Torre.
Aye.
President Medina.
Aye. What should I do about trustee Flores? Ms. gone? Yeah, we got one. Okay, well, motion carries.
Thank you.
We will now move on to item F3. Thank you. Our district and school site safety plans. I show Lisa again and Stacy.
Well, I think this is something new. Stacy and I get to present together, so.
This is, that we haven't had this
No,
opportunity
we have
yet.
not, so. Stacy and Lisa show, thank you. So.
And let me explain the change. So as coming in and we're building a comprehensive safety plan or safety framework, I always say we need a champion for each of these big initiatives. And so right now, Lisa and I are kind of champion building the framework, and within the framework that we'll be sharing soon as we have it a little bit more solidified, we're having champions for each of the categories within safety. And the safety plans are led by the champion of Stacy, but Lisa and I are holding all of the pieces till we really fully own them and have fleshed out all of the procedures and protocols and forms that will go with each of the sections of the framework. And so they're co-presenting because all the three of us are learning.
Thank you, Dr. Morales and President Medina, members of the board and our SRCS community. So I'll start by sharing that annually we bring the comprehensive safety plans to you for approval. Each year, these are built in coordination with district and site representatives. Some parts are written uniformly to respond to state and county regulations, and some parts are unique to each site. After each site finishes its plan in early March, the CSSP is presented to, which is the
Comprehensive Site Safety Plan.
Thank you, is presented to the site ELAC and the school site council for review and approval. Over the summer, each plan is presented to the SRPD and fire for review and approval, which you will see here as well. Once those approvals are completed, we bring these plans then to you. Stacy.
So over the next year, we are going to be following our practices that are in alignment with our new Article 8, as well as keeping our work in alignment with new legislation that is always coming out from the state of California and California Department of Education. We're going to be working collaboratively with our labor partners to fortify our comprehensive site safety plans. Dr. Morales and her team have drafted a solid, comprehensive safety framework in response to not only community interests in all things safety, but keeping in alignment with our expected protocols. We are working on an emergency management system to be included in the facilities master plan. Sites have begun the creation of a plan at a glance, which is a short document that includes the essential functions of a comprehensive site safety plan that would create a practical, useful tool that supports first responders during an emergency, rather than, if you could imagine, at the heart of an emergency, handing them a 50-page document. This is a practice that is getting picked up across all of Sonoma County in partnership with our working public safety community and in partnership with SRPD and fire. Oh, and Sonoma Sheriff. Can't forget that. We are going to be working with our labor partners to revise the safety plans to include an updated incident command protocol and the new Essential 5 emergency response actions. That is also part of the countywide practice of trying to calibrate all of our safety work.
In order to do this, we plan this year to make a substantive change. We are going to use our November 1st professional development to do a district-wide cohesive training that is rolled out at each site to operationalize the new incident command system. The training will include the new Essential 5 emergency response actions. In order to do this, we're going to adjust and offer that second professional development day that comes at the end of January, where staff will have options of different professional development opportunities. Normally, that's done in November. Now we're shifting that so that we can have a unified focus on safety at the November practice. And finally, to remind all of us that these are always living documents. And although we annually bring the plans to you in September, schools continue to partner with county, city, and emergency professionals in a continuous process of review, revise, and refine of our comprehensive site safety plans.
Some highlights of the things that are new in this year's plan. There's an emphasis on developing collaborative community-based partnerships that support our community. These plans include the new behavioral threat assessment process shared across Sonoma County. And this process had training opportunities, which many of our school sites took advantage of during the 23-24 school year. This year, there's another training scheduled for October 2nd. We continue ongoing partnerships and updates from community organizations such as Safe Routes to School. They met monthly in 23-24 and quarterly in 24-25. The SART meeting, which met monthly in 23-24 and scheduled for check-ins in the fall of 24 based on planned progress. And the County Public Safety Working Meeting, which is a quarterly meeting. The plan includes an integrated suicide prevention and risk assessment protocol. And it includes acknowledgement of the new safety notification of safe firearm storage for families per SB 906, now in year 2. And it does acknowledge ongoing alignment with SB 10, Megan's Law. Melanie, sorry. I'm so used to saying Megan. Looking at preventing and treating student opioid overdose, Narcan training, which we offered last year in the November PD, and it's planned again for January. And finally, each plan includes a new section of the Continuity of Operations Plan, or COOP, supports the continuation of district and school essential functions and uninterrupted services during emergencies that might typically provide interruption of those services. This includes ongoing training, leadership development, and regular attendance at safety meetings. And that concludes our report. Thank you so much. We turn it back to you, President Medina, for questions or information.
Board, any questions? Trustee Flores?
So in the front page of all the school safety plans, right, we have a couple of signatures there. We have the principal, and then we have the school safety committee, and the for most of them, and some of them we have the bilingual advisory board. And I wasn't sure what PAP meant for what school is this? Santa Rosa Charter of the Schools.
That is more than likely a principal's advisory.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And SSC is School Site Council, right?
School Site Council, the ELAC or other form of engagement, because different schools, including some of the charters, have other organizations or foundations that, but there is an expectation that ELAC and the Site Council will both have a review process for each school site plan.
I see date of update, at least here on the signature page of the one that I'm looking at. It's 5/30/24. Is this an update from when was it before doing it?
So the expectation is that the CSSP would be written and completed by March. And then between March and May, those would be brought to both the ELAC and the School Site Council. As both of those are meetings that happen monthly, it is difficult when you're competing with all the other agenda items. So the idea is that in April and May, each school would have the approval of those two different committees. And then in June, we present each of the comprehensive site safety plans to both Paul Lowenthal, who is the chief of Santa Rosa Fire, and Sergeant Crosby of Santa Rosa Police Department, so that our city partners can review each of the safety plans, ensure that it's meeting with their understanding, and do any sort of coordination over the summer, which is why then we bring the plans to you in September.
I think that just has to, I brought this up in the past, and I think my understanding has always been that the school site council and all that has to have their part done up by March 1st. And then we have, from there it comes to the board, and we have to have it to the state by October 15th. So I just wanted to be clear that we understand, because like I said, I think I initially brought this up with Superintendent Kitamura when we were behind a while back ago. And so either we need to clarify our policies, specifically BP 450, because I think it's site and ed code. So I think, to me, this says that we're behind in terms of our deadlines internally. So if we could get that clarified and make sure that we're getting it done on time, I think that's important. Because right now I'm anticipating that the next one should be done by March 1st.
Thank you.
Other board questions? Trustee La Torre?
So remind me again, please, what the hard deadline is for this approval from the board?
I believe that we have to have them, as President Medina said, to the state by October 15th. So essentially, it does need to be done within the next couple of meetings. These have already gone to our partners through SRPD and the fire department that's what they're planning on as far as how they interact with the sites, as far as what they expect to be providing support on, is based on these plans that they've received.
Oh, we've mentioned some upcoming amendments that are going to be made to these due to the work that's being put into place this year. I also noticed we have some signatures on here from site principals that are no longer at those sites. And if we are approving this plans for sites in current year, I'd really like to see that signature so I can see that this year's principal seen and approved the safety plan. So I just don't know if I'm fully comfortable approving this tonight if we have stuff coming down the pike that should be clarified before we do board approval.
Because it was taken to their site councils during last school year. That's why the signatures are the way they are. That's what the team that approved it at that point, and then it goes to SRPD. Yes, and the principals that are currently there will be working off of that agreed upon plan, because that's the process of taking it to our first responders for them to sign. So we can have the principals double sign now, but the ones that are official are the ones that were approved by the principal with their site council.
I just want to see documentation that our principals this year have seen and approved this and their names on it before I approve something saying, this is what I need your school to do for your site safety plan. It just gives me comfortability that that year's site principal in charge of that site knows what they're doing.
Got it.
And I think I just add to clarification that the way that the policy is written, it says at the beginning of the school year, which we just started, is when you could start looking at it to have it done by March of the next year. And then not till the following October is when we have to have it to the state. So it's a very long process, but I'm comfortable with these signatures. That's my point. Trustee De La Cruz.
Thank you. I have a question. There's a lot in here around kind of discipline and consequences at each of the sites. What I don't see is, one of the things that we have definitely lifted up to recognize safety in schools is the restorative process. It has no place in this document. And so I'm just wondering, how can we ensure that this is a really holistic document that recognizes the importance of restorative processes and make sure that folks understand, where in the discipline process, how that functions with some consistency across the board. This is I would say it's such an investment that this board has made and that this district has really lifted up as a leader throughout the county, and recognizing the importance of having these processes in place to avoid, to heal, right? To heal when there are challenges. And so I'm just wondering, when we might be able to see some of those things in the next version of these plans, and where those procedures are with some consistency and some fidelity to restorative processes. Like where do folks know how to find those processes and how to understand the way that they also impact school safety?
Thank you. That is something that we are working on. There's as I'm sure you can imagine, there's a lot of integrated programs and a lot of integrated processes that come through here. And one of the things that we are currently working on as an active process with Dr. Morales and our restoratives is updating the restorative framework. And that will be a nice way to integrate it in a nice, clean way into this. A lot of the portions of the comprehensive site safety plan are mandated, and they are almost scripted by some of the legislature that exists. And again, we do have some space to kind of add our own flair. And that is something that we have recognized as something that needs to be integrated in there in a more substantive way.
Thank you. When do you imagine that happens? Is that in the next round of the school site safety plans next year?
Yes, hopefully that we would have it completed in such a way that it can have its own integrated section in the next iteration of the plans.
Okay. And then I think this is just a request that, I think has come up quite a number of times, just to, I know we've heard presentations from our restoratives, but just seeing it kind of like what is the restorative procedure that Santa Rosa City Schools utilizes. I know we've heard that practices are, not consistent at different sites depending on who's doing them. And so, I love the idea of making sure that it's in black and white, in one place for everybody at a school site to understand that this is also a really critical tool in our belt. And, that is very clearly articulated as a critical function of creating a safe campus.
Well, and while the restorative response specialists are written into each of these plans in the section under school safety, what you're talking about, that really kind of hard crafted framework is the piece that is missing. So the acknowledgement of our program does exist here. It's the fully fleshed out framework that you're talking about.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Other board comments, questions? I don't see any. I don't see any comment cards. So I'll bring it back to the board. I do have just an additional comment there on that school discipline section. I do see just one little tiny section on one of the ones that I'm looking at. And basically all it says is students are given access to a digital copy of like the code of conduct or the student handbook. And same thing a little further down that also says the same thing for staff. I think if maybe that could be added as an appendix or something, if that's what it's referencing, would be good as well. Anything else, board? Questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, so I'm seeing very comprehensive plans, right? Where in the plan, I've been trying to looking for it for a while. Where in the plan does it talk about in the case of emergency, where do parents go to meet up with their students?
Are you talking about the reunification and plans? So
Right.
in an
Yes,
evacuation,
and
when
yes,
there has been
yeah.
an extended evacuation and a
Right.
reunification plan,
Yeah.
it is important to remember that the plan that you are approving and that you see here before you today is the public-facing document.
Oh.
And in order to ensure that we do have not only the most up-to-date information, but the safest information, there are portions of the comprehensive safety plan that are not public-facing to ensure safe reunification with our families. And so that is not embedded directly into these plans so that we can make these plans public-facing.
Thank you.
Any other board comments? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move approval of district and school site safety plans.
Second.
Moved by trustee Sheffield, seconded by trustee De La Cruz. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's go to the
Are
vote.
the motions and second with the amendments discussed, or do we have to say that
Was
specifically?
that offered as a motion or an amendment?
What were the amendments? I didn't hear.
I
any
didn't hear amendments, but
And Lisa talked about adding amendments to the safety plan that we're talking about this year
let's start an
That would be
amendment for this year.
Updates for the
for the future.
Yeah. Because
Right, so rather than amending
Because it's
this,
living document. I just want to make sure
Yes.
it's right.
right. This is the plan that we are bringing for approval right now. Then as the year goes on, we rewrite, we recraft, we redesign. And the new plan is then finalized March 1st, gone through the approval process and then brought back. So it's not that, when we make one change in October, then we bring it to you. We bring it annually. The changes can happen ongoing.
My motion's for the approval of these site safety plans.
And I think just the other part is that these aren't created by us, they're created by the site councils and the staff. So for them to be amended, they'd have to go back to them to re-amend and bring it up. We're just approving the work that they did.
So at what point is it appropriate time to talk about me wanting current principles on these?
To include the principles. Well, I think what I heard in terms of the directive, to Superintendent Morales is that for any plan that's presented here that wasn't signed by an existing principal, that she gets it signed by them and make sure that they've done that. And to me, that's.
Bring it back as a.
Well,
I'm fine with that. If we need an additional signature, that's great. I hear what you're saying.
I
This
just
is-
don't want to approve something for this current year that a current principal is not signed on. And some of these documents, our active principal is not signed on this. So your motion is to approve how it's listed, and some of these documents do not have this year's current principal on them. So to my vision, that principal is, like, they've accepted it, they've taken that school over, but they haven't signed as saying as a site principal.
I hear you. I'm sticking with my motion, but if we want to add signatures, that's fine.
If I can just add some clarification, at our leadership launch, the principals were required to review these and use them as part of that process. So the new principals have seen these and have worked with them.
Well, let's put their signatures on it. I mean,
Yeah.
it really,
Just letting you know that we are bringing something to you that they haven't seen.
right.
So we will absolutely get signatures
But this
on
isn't
those.
our document to modify. That's what I'm
Correct.
getting at. That's why
Yes.
my motion is for approval.
Thank you.
Other discussion? All right, let's go to the vote.
Student Board Member Zuniga.
Aye.
Trustee Sheffield.
Aye.
Trustee De La Cruz.
Aye.
Trustee McNally. Aye. Trustee De La Torre.
Aye.
Trustee Flores.
Aye.
President Medina.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move on to our G items. If I could entertain a motion to approve items G1 through G9 and G11 through G12.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by trustee De La Cruz, seconded by trustee Sheffield. If we could have a vote?
Student Board Member Zuniga.
Aye.
Trustee De La Cruz.
Aye.
Trustee Sheffield.
Aye.
Trustee McNally. Aye. Trustee De La Torre.
Aye.
Trustee Flores.
Aye.
President Medina.
Aye, thank you. And now we'll move on to item G10. I do have a public comment card for this item. Leona Rockwell, are you still here? Thank you. You will have 2 minutes to comment on item G10.
Is it on? Yes, cool, awesome. So my name's Leona Rockwell. I teach at Santa Rosa Middle School. I've been there since 2005. Good evening, board members. I just wanted to thank the board for hopefully your approval on our MOU for Cougar Connections, our advisory. I wanted to share what we hope to accomplish, just so you know what you're approving. Our Cougar Connections is an advisory time designed for the students and centered around the students. Our goal with Connections is to build and improve our Cougar community and improve our school culture. We want every student to have a trusted adult, safe space on campus. We hope to explore how we are more similar than different and that we are all human. We all have the potential to be good humans and that we all have shared human experiences. Our counselors worked on creating advisory groups of up to 20 students, all of the same grade level, but with many different life experiences and needs, so hopefully every student voice is heard. A committee of staff members has built many lessons centered around community building, as well as general topics like school norms, growth mindset, goal setting, health and wellness, and identity. We want to create a healing space that just allows the students to be. As I said, I've been at Santa Rosa Middle School since 2005, and I've seen our community and school culture change. So I'm hopeful that we can rebuild our culture and make it a positive and safe space where, again, we can all acknowledge that we're human. Thank you.
Thank you, Leona. Back to the board. Is there any discussion or comments? Trustee De La Cruz?
I just want to thank you, Ms. Rockwell, for all that you do at Santa Rosa Middle. Our family has been really lucky to have you in our lives as an educator and a source of support in creating a culture at Santa Rosa Middle that, is really one that we have really enjoyed. And I know that so many other kids are going to benefit from this deeper thinking and this kind of dedication of resources and intentionality to, school culture. So I'm really excited about this. Thank you for making the time to bring it to us and make sure that the whole board understands what's happening. That's a best practice at a specific site and how we can lift that up across the district. So super grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other board comments? Trustee Zuniga?
Hi, Ms. Rockwell, long time no see. Thank you for what you do. Your classroom was one of the classrooms in middle school where I felt the most accepted and comfortable to share what I thought. I felt the most open-minded and it was a really beautiful setting. I was laughing, I was having proficient conversations with my friends, even though we were very little. And the book clubs were great. And coming into your lunchroom to watch anime was actually the greatest thing ever. So all that you do for the middle school community is remembered, and we still talk about it today. And so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Student Trustee Zuniga. Any other board comments? Seeing none, is there a motion on item G10?
I'd like to move to approve the multiple site MOUs with the city schools and the Teachers Association regarding bill schedules, minutes, and prep periods.
Is there a second? Moved by Trustee De La Cruz, seconded by Trustee Sheffield. Any discussion? Seeing none, to the vote?
Student Board Member Zuniga.
Aye.
Trustee De La Cruz.
Aye.
Trustee Sheffield.
Aye.
Trustee McNally.
Aye.
Trustee De La Torre.
Aye.
Trustee Flores.
Aye.
President Medina.
Aye. Thank you. We will now move on to our H1 item, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting held on August 28th, 2024.
Move to
Motion
approve.
approved. Second.
Okay, moved by Trustee De La Cruz,
The day laws are in the house, just, yeah. shake it.
seconded by Trustee De La Torre. To the vote?
Student Board Member Zuniga.
Aye.
Trustee De La Cruz.
Aye.
Trustee De La Torre.
Aye.
Trustee Sheffield.
Aye.
Trustee McNally.
Abstain?
Trustee Flores.
Aye.
President Medina.
Aye, thank you. And now we move on to our board member requests for information. Board, any requests for information? Speak now or forever hold your peace. None? None? All right, we'll go on to point out our J information items. New on there today is the letter from the Department of Education under J4 regarding the high school voter education weeks, September 16th to the 27th. And with that, Superintendent Morales, any last comments?
Just along our future board items, in one of those meetings, we will have the draft of the safety plan. I want to take it to PI and a couple of others committees for their input, as well as, share. I've already shared it with some of our labor partners, just make sure that all of them have seen it, have had some input, see how it's going to work, and then we will bring it to one of these meetings. It's not currently listed, but it's soon coming.
Middle school, back to school nights tomorrow, just
Yes.
5:30 to 8:30.
Meeting adjourned, 8:05.